Oh my God.
From all indications, there were multiple shooters who fired dozens of shots, perhaps more than 50. Remarkably, all of those bullets missed a baby who was sitting in the car that was targeted.
Investigators remained at the scene well after nightfall at this corner littered with shell casings, where somehow a baby in this bullet-riddled car emerged unscathed.
What's the purpose of shooting at a car when you know there's a child in the car? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it could be a lot of other people who's lost their life here today.
Kirk Bell is the godfather of 26-year-old Gabryel Ayers, who relatives identify as the woman who was shot and killed in her white Chevy sedan around 1:30 p.m. at 79th and May Street, her car then crashing into a van.
This here is unbelievable. This young lady was a beautiful young lady with a beautiful child, and life just cut short. For what?
Ayers' boyfriend in the car also shot multiple times, but her 13-month-old baby daughter, who was sitting in the back, escaped unhurt.
It's a miracle that baby was not shot. It's a miracle.
St. Sabina Church is around the block from where the gunfire erupted, and the church's food pantry is on that corner. People inside hiding in a back room, and after the gunfire, emerged to help the victims.
So they saw, the young man and the woman shot up in the cars. They were trying to get the baby out, but they gave the baby immediately to the police, and the policewoman took it in her car and was holding it.
They need to clean this city up. They need to. This gangs and the shooting and the killing is just unbelievable.
Gabryel Ayers' mother tells me her daughter worked as a hairstylist and was training to be a letter carrier. Police have not offered a motive for the shooting.
The evening felt ordinary, the kind that passes without notice, the kind no one ever expects to remember. Gabryel Ayers sat in the car beside her boyfriend, the city of Chicago moving around them in its usual rhythm. Streetlights glowing, distant traffic humming, life continuing as it always does. There was no warning, no sign that this quiet moment was about to turn into something tragic. It's often in moments like these, when everything feels normal, that life changes forever. The car moved steadily through the streets, conversations light, the presence of her child in the back seat a reminder of responsibility, of love, of a future still being built. The narration lingers on this sense of calm, drawing you into the everyday reality she was living. A young mother, focused on her life, unaware that danger was already closing in. The streets, though familiar, suddenly feel different, as if something unseen is waiting just around the corner. Then, without warning, everything shatters. Loud cracks pierce the air, rapid and relentless. The calm disappears instantly, replaced by confusion and fear. The vehicle is struck again and again, the sound overwhelming, impossible to process in real time. Panic takes over as the driver struggles to react, to escape, but there is no clear direction, no time to think. The moment stretches, each second feeling longer than the last, as chaos consumes everything. In the middle of this unfolding nightmare, it's hard not to pause and reflect on how quickly life can change. And if you're following this story, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss how it all unfolds. Because stories like this remind us just how unpredictable life can be. The car begins to lose control, motion turning unstable, the world outside blurring into streaks of light and shadow. What started as an ordinary night is now something else entirely, something irreversible. And as the vehicle drifts toward its fate, one question hangs in the air. Why did this happen? The car finally comes to a stop, its motion replaced by a heavy, unnatural silence. Just moments ago, everything was chaos, but now the stillness feels almost louder, as if the night itself is holding its breath. The streets of Chicago continue on in the distance, unaware of the tragedy that has just unfolded in this single, devastating moment. Inside the vehicle, the reality begins to settle in, though it's almost too overwhelming to fully grasp. Emergency sirens begin to rise, faint at first, then growing louder as help rushes toward the scene. Flashing lights cut through the darkness, painting everything in shades of red and blue. First responders move quickly, their actions practiced but urgent, as they assess what has happened. The focus turns to Gabryel Ayers, who is found unresponsive. Despite every effort, it becomes clear that she did not survive the attack. The weight of that realization hangs heavy, not just for those at the scene, but for anyone hearing the story. Her boyfriend is still alive, but seriously injured, caught between survival and the trauma of what has just occurred. The narration lingers on this fragile line, emphasizing how close life and loss can exist in the same moment. It's a painful reminder that even in tragedy, outcomes can differ in ways that feel both unfair and unimaginable. And then, in a moment that shifts everything, there's a discovery that no one expected. In the back seat, her young child is found alive, safe, unharmed. It's almost impossible to comprehend. A small life preserved in the middle of so much destruction. That single detail introduces a quiet, fragile sense of hope into an otherwise heartbreaking scene, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, something can still endure. As the scene unfolds, it's hard not to think about how many stories like this go unheard. If this one is impacting you, take a moment to share it with someone else, because awareness matters more than we often realize. The sirens continue, the lights keep flashing, but the questions are already beginning to form. Who did this? And more importantly, why? By the time the sun rises over Chicago, the scene has already transformed from chaos into a place of questions. What remains is evidence, silent, scattered pieces of a story investigators are now determined to understand. Detectives move carefully, documenting every detail, knowing that even the smallest clue could matter. The streets that once carried the noise of the night before now feel different, marked by what happened there. The case quickly centers around Gabryel Ayers, but for investigators, this is more than a name. It's a timeline they must reconstruct. They begin tracing her last known movements, speaking to witnesses who heard the sudden eruption of violence. Some describe confusion. Others recall how quickly it all happened, but no one seems to have a complete picture. That's often how these cases begin, fragments of truth scattered across different perspectives. Attention turns to the possibility that this was not random. The way the attack unfolded suggests planning, intent, something targeted rather than accidental. But without clear suspects, every theory remains just that, a theory. Detectives follow leads, reviewing surveillance footage, checking nearby cameras, hoping to catch even a glimpse of the people responsible. Each second of footage becomes important, each shadow analyzed, each movement questioned. At the same time, the community begins to react. News spreads quickly, and with it comes fear, anger, and a deep sense of unease. People start asking their own questions, wondering how something like this could happen so suddenly, so violently. The story grows beyond the scene itself, becoming part of a larger conversation about safety and justice. And if you've made it this far into the story, drop a like and subscribe to stay with us until the end. Because the deeper we go, the more complex this case becomes. Despite all the effort, one truth becomes clear. Answers won't come easily. The evidence tells part of the story, but not enough to close the gap between what happened and why. And as investigators continue their work, the mystery only deepens, leaving everyone waiting for the moment when the pieces finally come together. As the investigation continues, the focus slowly shifts from the unanswered questions to the life that was lost. Gabryel Ayers becomes more than just a name in a report. She becomes a story, a memory, a presence deeply missed by those who knew her. Friends and family begin to speak, sharing pieces of who she was beyond that tragic night. They describe her as a devoted mother, someone whose world centered around her child, someone who carried both strength and warmth in equal measure. In neighborhoods across Chicago, the weight of the loss is felt in quiet but powerful ways. Candles are lit, their soft glow flickering in the night as people gather to mourn. The air is filled with emotion, grief, disbelief, and a shared sense of frustration. It's not just about one life taken, but about what that loss represents. A future cut short, a child who will grow up without a mother, a family left trying to make sense of something that feels impossible to accept. Amid the sorrow, one detail continues to stand out: the survival of her child. It becomes a symbol for many, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, something fragile can endure. People hold on to that thought, not because it erases the pain, but because it offers a small sense of meaning in a situation that otherwise feels senseless. The narration slows here, allowing the weight of everything to settle in. It invites reflection, not just on this story, but on others like it, stories that don't always make headlines, stories that fade too quickly from public attention. And if this moment is hitting you, take a second to like, share, and subscribe, because keeping these stories alive is one way people continue to be remembered. The chapter closes on a quiet note, the candles still burning, the crowd slowly dispersing, but the impact remaining. Because even as time moves forward, the absence left behind doesn't fade nearly as quickly. Time moves forward, but for many connected to Gabryel Ayers, it doesn't feel the same. Days turn into weeks, and the case slowly shifts from breaking news to an ongoing search for answers. Investigators in Chicago continue their work, following leads, reviewing evidence, and trying to close the gap between what is known and what still remains hidden. But progress is slow, and with every passing day, the silence surrounding the case grows heavier. There are still no clear answers, no confirmed arrests, and that uncertainty lingers over everything. For the family, for the community, for anyone who has followed the story, the question remains the same: who is responsible, and when will justice come? The narration leans into that uncertainty, not to frustrate, but to reflect reality. Not every story has a clean ending, and sometimes the hardest part is learning to live without closure. At the same time, life continues for those left behind. Her child, who survived that night, now carries a story she will one day come to understand. It's a thought that sits quietly beneath everything else, a reminder that the impact of one moment stretches far into the future. The people who loved Gabryel hold on to memories, keeping her presence alive in the only way they can. As the story begins to come full circle, it returns to where it started, an ordinary night that turned into something unforgettable. The contrast is clear now. What once felt routine is now a moment that changed everything. And maybe that's why stories like this matter. They remind us of how fragile life can be, and how important it is to pay attention, to care, to remember. If you've stayed with this story until the end, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. Not just for the channel, but to keep stories like this from being forgotten, because awareness can be the first step toward change. The chapter closes not with answers, but with a quiet reflection. Somewhere in the city, life goes on as usual. But for those who know this story, the silence left behind speaks louder than anything else.